800 844 747. Magic Talk.
Magic Talk with Mike. It's time for our leadership expert, our executive coach, our author, a man with the very soothing voice, Harold Hillman. How are you?
Hello, Mike. Good to see you.
Okay, well, I always feel inspired when I have you in studio, and I'm sure those listening feel inspired as well. Today we're going to be talking about resilience, a word that we've heard a lot about over the last month. You know, everyone says Christchurch, what a resilient place, resilient people there.
Yeah.
So, you know, what is resilience?
It's probably the best definition for resilience, the one that most people will give you when you ask that question, is the ability to bounce back from adversity.
Right.
As plain and simple as that. You sort of picture two people, staring at an obstacle, and they hit that obstacle, and they sort of, they get thrown a bit. It's the resilient person who's going to rebound and go at it again.
And do you think the world we're living in now, which is very fast-paced, there's a lot going on, do we have to show more resilience?
We most certainly do. I predict that in another decade, resilience is just going to be a basic requirement for particularly leaders in companies, that it will be hard to exist in a world where the cycles of change have compressed so significantly, threefold over the last decade, to the point now that vulnerability, anxiety, uncertainty, ambiguity are more, par for the course, as opposed to 20 years ago when you could park all of that because the cycles of change were much longer. So you're absolutely right.
And there's, I guess, too, the pressure not only to be resilient in the workplace, but the pressure to be resilient in your personal life, because there's a lot of moving parts going on all the time.
Yeah.
So you got to deal with it, haven't you?
Look, it requires some discipline, because the traditional parameters or boundaries between work and home that I certainly grew up with, 2-3 decades ago. We're in a different world now, so we bring work into home and we bring home into work, and those two zones overlap, and before you know it, particularly if a person is inclined to be a bit of a workaholic, where it can become relentless after a while, to the point where social relationships, marriages, all of those things become impacted. And so resilience is something, it's 24/7 now.
And companies quite like resilience, don't they?
That's right.
Because if they're taking you on and you can deal with a lot of things, then I guess there's a better product at the end of the day. But it's still a tough thing to deal with, resilience, isn't it? Because it can get you down.
Look, it can, but you can actually build it. You can actually build it. We didn't even focus on this until the mid 1970s. Mike, where there was a study done in Hawaii of a community where there was a heavy preponderance of mental disorders and addictive substance addictions.
Yes.
And that the kids in those neighborhoods typically didn't make it out.
Right.
They basically just, sort of got caught in that same negative swirl as their parents. But there were roughly 25% of these kids who miraculously went on to thrive. And so the first study on psychological resilience was from this one, which really reinforced that it's a mindset thing. It's about perspective. And that's when we then began to sort of put a psychological wrap around resilience. We used to think of it as an engineering term, just related to the structural fortitude of buildings. But now, when people hear that word, they're more inclined to think, how strong am I? How capable am I from being able to rebound from adversity?
Is it something learnt or something that's in your genes?
It's certainly, there are some people who, for whatever reason, they just, they have a cape on. They just, they can rebound from anything. And you say that, well, that might just be genetic wiring or something like that. For most of us, resilience is something that we have to build.
Right.
And there have been a number of studies that really demonstrate that there's some things that you can do to make yourself more resilient, where you don't then suffer sort of the side impact. Greater for people who are not resilient. It impacts on their self-esteem. It will impact on just their confidence, their ability to push through. Their relationships are typically a bit more impoverished. And so it's one of those things where if you live in a busy world and have a busy life, then it pays to be proactive around your resilience.
Okay, so how do we build it then, Harold?
Well, I've been influenced by some impressive research from the Mayo Clinic out of the U.S. and an executive wellness center there, and they've identified a few things that would make a difference. Resilient people are people who they're able to elicit what's called the relaxation response. They purposefully, when they go home, they don't turn on the news, but they turn on music.
Right.
They news is important, but
Yes.
they turn on music, or they sit down to read, or they do something that they really enables them to detach from sort of the stress of that fast-paced workplace.
A slight meditation phase.
Absolutely, where where they take themselves, they're more
That's right.
mindful around relaxing. Reframing is another thing. There's some people who, when things start to go wrong, our perspective can get pretty myopic and narrower and narrower. And so it's really helpful for a person to be able to reframe from what you see as a problem as actually an opportunity.
Okay.
And to really just put a reframe on it.
Nice.
Physical exercise and nutrition make a big difference.
Yeah, true.
And
I understand that.
Yeah, just in terms of a well person. Humor makes a big, it's important to laugh.
Yes.
Laughter makes a big difference sometimes when you're pushing through adversity. And then knowing and nurturing your passion. Each of us will have a passion, and the question is, do we get so busy at work or other distractions in our life that we don't plug into something? It's almost like plugging into the wall there, where, for some people it is writing. For me, it's writing, and I can lose. It's where you have that sense that time, you go like, well, goodness gracious, where did the time go? For some people, it's gardening.
Yes.
Others, it's cooking. Some, it is entertaining.
Yeah.
For others, it's just something that when you are doing it, you are fueled with energy, and it's good to fuel yourself. And too many people unplug from things that really are their passions, parking them for when they can get to them. And unfortunately, sometimes, that explains why sometimes people just feel depleted.
That's right. And, I know that people are going to say, but it's a busy world, there's lots going on. You've just got to try and make some time for that, haven't you?
You
It's
do.
so important.
The factor in terms of resilience, resilient people are just more disciplined about it. They don't fit those things in. They build them in. And that's a different mentality. People sometimes fit in their friends who fuel them.
Yeah.
And so they unplug from friends for 5 or 6 months because they've got, you need to be plugging into people who make you laugh.
Okay, we're talking about how to build your resilience. You've given us some factors to help build resilience. Any more you've got there?
No, it
Is there
also,
anywhere else we could go?
well, it certainly helps to have a strong support network.
Right.
Resilient people do tend to be, just in terms of their support network, there are more people to plug into. That's always helpful because people around you can give you some perspective on what they're seeing from you that you may not be able to see. So, having people around you definitely makes a difference.
And if everything's good at work for you, because I know we've talked about this a few times over the weekends, I find too that your workplace can surprise you with support when you are needing resilience. If you've got a family feel at your workplace, they will be great support to help you build resilience, won't they?
Absolutely. I think it's important. Peter Senge wrote a book, The Fifth Discipline, and he talked about the need for people to have a ruthlessly compassionate partner at work. And that's the person who'll walk in and go, you know what, you look like crap, and you need to take better care of yourself. And being here 14 hours every day is not helping you. It's not helping us, that type of a thing.
Right.
So it does help in terms of just having people around you who care about you and will sometimes help you see what you can't see.
Nice. Okay, good. And is there like a website or anything we can go to? Something else we can listen to? Have you got anything for us?
Yeah, we've got a few resources here in New Zealand. Sven Hansen, who I have a lot of respect for, runs the Resilience Institute and, works with individuals and teams and organizations. But there are other websites. One is called Foresight. Another one is called Umbrella. And then there's Bright Star. These are all I recommend that your listeners just plug into one of those websites and learn a little bit more about resilience.
Oh, well, I love listening to you talk about resilience, Harold. It's always an absolute pleasure. Hopefully you've learned something too today listening. And, of course, Harold, we'll see you again next week.
Thank you, Mike.